And learning takes place through formal, non-formal, and informal modes. And it will be helpful to reflect on this in thinking through discipleship. Formal learning is what's happening here. A class setting, you're going through a formal education. Non-formal learning is what Jesus did with the disciples. They became his apprentices, and his time with them is change-oriented. Informal learning is what happens just in daily life. Now, Jesus was with the disciples in daily life, but it was purposely framed as apprenticeship type of learning. If we really want to disciple the way Jesus did, we need to have people live with us who are going to be our disciples, rather than simply meeting once a week and walking through the material. I don't know about you, but that would be really hard for me to be able to do that. So again, learning in Matthew, you think of an event, the calling of Matthew. This is a formal educational setting, but it's also informal. It's the gold boxes where I'm intending to highlight these. It's an apprenticeship. Come, follow me. Jesus being questioned about fasting took place in the normal appearance of life. This is an informal event. Jesus raises a dead girl and heals the sick woman, heals the blind and the mute. These are both apprenticeship the disciples are observing, but this is as circumstances that Jesus came across in life. Teaching in towns and villages is more formal. Not necessarily they're getting a certificate or a degree. You really don't see that in Jesus' day unless somebody is being trained to be a rabbi or a disciple. Perhaps Jesus' questioning of the leaders in the temple as a 12-year-old boy is the closest thing you'll see to what would be a standardized, normal teaching situation in his day and age, but that's not how he's discipling. Okay, again, we turn to the Korean and the American frame of reference in terms of learning now, and for the Americans, I'll choose the rights or justice, Matthew 9:13, but go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. On the Korean value side, 1 Timothy 5:4, but if a widow has children or grandchildren, those should learn first of all put their religion in practice by caring for their own family and so repaying their parents and grandparents, for this is pleasing to God. You have an obligation to your family to live in harmony and to meet their needs. And learn to do this is what Paul is saying to them. And again, that would be something that would appeal to a Korean audience. So again, as you look through these passages, imagine what difference this makes in discipleship settings for you. If you're working with not just a Korean, you'll find this in Chinese values as well too. Just about any Confucian-oriented country would have these values because this is Confucian framing of how you're to live your life. And so they would have this as part of their growing up. The last thing we'll look at is the governing systems, how organizations maintain order. Who becomes the pastor in your church after the pastor retires or the Lord takes the pastor home? Who is the leader? How are they chosen? How does the congregation make decisions? Often in the North American setting, and my church is going through this merger at this point in time, we look to votes. So in our case, first we had a recommendation of a committee that was set up from representatives of both churches to consider whether this would be a good idea, and they recommended yes, it would be. Each board of elders took this and then they voted yes, yay or nay on this, and both boards voted unanimously on it. Next step in a couple of weeks is going to the congregation. We tend to think in terms of democracy and voting. I'm curious where that shows up in the New Testament. You're hard-pressed to find it. How do you maintain internal order? How do you discipline someone who gets out of line? One of the challenges we face in the North American church is if a church wants to discipline somebody, the person can go find another church if they're interested. Could be a church across the street. Could be a church down the block. Could be a church in another city. We don't have any vehicles today for across denominational sides or across church polity sides as how to maintain discipline. That's one advantage that the Catholic Church has over Protestant churches, because they do have a more unified structure. Even though they don't necessarily always check up with each other, the possibility is there. Internal threats to a group's existence come from the competition for power. How is that competition maintained within the body of the church? Often in North American churches, it's done through policies and procedures, and we set those in place. It's funny to look at a place like Wheaton, which has 150 plus years of policies in place now. How many of those policies were designed because one individual did something that tweaked us a little bit, and so we wrote a policy, and it's been in place for 25, 30, 50, 100 years now, and there's no real reason to hang on to it anymore. It just is on the books, and we don't even question it at all. But it comes about over time, and every organization has a history of developing policies, and often the policies are framed not on the basis of what works for the vast majority, but on the basis of stopping the minority from doing things that hurt the rest of the group. So when we look at the governing system, it's this network of institutions and social roles that people play. Acts 15, 1 through 30, establishing membership. How do you know whether a person is a Christian, is the question they were asking. They ask it in a way we don't ask today. They were asking, does he have to be circumcised, or does she, well, not she, does he have to be circumcised? Again, so you're talking male membership at this point in time. Versus all who believe, including the Gentiles. There was a mutual agreement. They outlined the decision, they put it in writing to distribute among the churches, lending significant social weight to it. You have to remember this is a day when putting something in writing is not as simple as emailing it. The writing materials they had, the ability to write, are limited in scale for them, so just doing this is important. How do they oversee the change? They appointed special delegates. They met in Jerusalem to argue about it. Decision was made by both the apostles and the elders over this, and they all agreed to it. Then they sent a letter to Antioch and elsewhere. That's how they promulgated it. It's interesting, however, throughout the rest of the New Testament, you don't see this letter ever referred to. There's not a place where it's taken up again. And so you wonder to what extent this is a one-time thing, the solution was given, and as far as they were concerned, the answer was done. They didn't need to come back to it. It doesn't mean it was unimportant to them. Perhaps it only means they didn't need to come back to it. So looking again now at Korean versus U.S. values, I'll look at independence now, Acts 15, 36 to 40. Sometime later, Paul said to Barnabas, let us go back and visit the brothers in all the towns where we preach the word of the Lord and see how they're doing. Barnabas wanted to take John Mark. John also caught Mark with them. Paul did not think it was wise to take him because he deserted them in Pamphylia and had not continued with them in the work. They had such a sharp disagreement they parted company. Barnabas took Mark and sailed for Cyprus, but Paul chose Silas and left, commended by the brothers in the grace of the Lord. So that's an independence from each other, Paul having the right to make this decision, even though Barnabas was older in the faith than Paul was. And on the Korean value side, faith and honor, 1 Peter 2:17, show proper respect to everyone, love the brotherhood of believers, fear God, and honor the king. That's how you live peacefully in society. Are we teaching that to our disciples? It's a biblical verse. We tend not to emphasize it here in this country, but it's a verse that would be highly emphasized in a Korean setting.